Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Sacred Anarchies, a post-church podcast. I am here, of course, with my fabulous bestie and co-conspirator and colleague and co-worker, and I just keep going down the list every time, seeing how many titles I can give you this week, Barry. And we have someone very special with us today, Baz.
We do. We have our friend Phil Drysdale
Mm-hmm.
in Manchester, Britain's apparently second city, but I think many people in Manchester would say it's the first city, and I wouldn't blame them.
Hey Phil, I didn't know we got as high as second.
Well, isn't Manchester the second, technically called the second city in Britain?
I think a lot of people do, but I mean, it's by a lot of metrics. I don't think it hits second anymore.
No, I don't
right?
think.
I mean,
at least like population.
Pretty small.
Wise.
It's yeah. It's yeah.
But in terms of the Industrial Revolution,
yeah, yeah.
Well, I didn't realize when I moved here, and because I've been to the UK on and off lots of times for the past several years, very heavily, especially the last 2 or 3 years as I've been studying Cambridge. But I didn't realize until I met my husband and started kind of settling into life here that there are like these known differences between the North and the South, and it's like a thing.
And then just wait till you find out I'm Scottish, and I think where I am is down south, right? So I'm in the north of England, and I'm like, this isn't north. What are you guys talking about, right?
Exactly.
Long way to go.
Yeah, and people in London have started calling things north about 200 miles south of where I am. So
exactly. Watford.
It's a weird dynamic. A weird dynamic in the UK.
All relative, but we're
It's
so
a
grateful
small
to
island.
with us today, Phil. We've known Phil for a little while, not too long. We were introduced through mutual friends maybe a year ago now. I think we met at the beginning of the lockdown on a Zoom call, to be honest.
That's right. Yeah. Gosh, yeah. So it must be about a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're pandemic friends. My husband and I are a pandemic couple. We met in the pandemic. We married, but it's like all our relationships are kind of being.
How long is this pandemic going? Right? People are going to be like meeting, having babies. It's like, yeah, I graduated as a pandemic child. I was born, graduated, like.
COVID babies. I mean, all.
Oh God, help us.
You are doing some really interesting and amazing and valuable work in the area of deconstruction, hence you being a part of our series, Talk Deconstruction to Me. And I mean, there are a lot of people. So we're going to talk about a lot of things today. And then we're going to end this call and go on your podcast. So we're going to kind of
right.
the deconstruction community, I think, over the next few weeks with this. But, there's this whole idea of deconstruction is becoming really trendy. And I don't think so much it's because it's a fad and people are just looking for the latest thing. I think people are finally finding a voice, and finally finding really safe spaces to engage some of their struggle with religious systems, and everything that has been suppressed for so long. And with that being said, there are a lot of people now. You could go to Instagram and see in the bios of so many people, deconstruction this and deconstructing that. And, but you're kind of an OG of the deconstruction. You've been doing it a long time, before a lot of other people were. And you have this amazing breadth and depth of work that you've done over the last at least several years. It's been more than that, hasn't it?
It's been a little while, yeah. It's always hard to pinpoint something like deconstruction because it is just an unraveling of evaluating your beliefs, changing beliefs, growing in uncertainty, and enjoying that uncertainty. And so, yeah, like it's a bit of a complex one going, that was the moment. Some people can, right? Some people have an experience of maybe abuse or an extreme case in a church somewhere, or maybe a particular theology, or maybe their son came out as gay and they were like, gosh, that is the thing that caused me to start all the questions. But for a lot of people, it's just a slow kind of whittling away of starting to ask some questions. And I think for me, that probably falls into my category a lot more. So it's very hard for me to kind of go, that's when.
Yeah. Of course. I think we would probably all say, when did you first start kind of looking at your house of cards? Or, well, I don't know, it's it's hard to say because this happened and then this happened. But one thing I really appreciate about you and the work that you do, and what I feel like really sets you apart from a lot of other people who are also doing good work, but you kind of have this presence of, maybe not presence, but, and you're not a pastor, but you are very pastoral in the work you do and how you look after people. And I have found you to be incredibly compassionate and grace-filled and empathetic. And you just really see the struggle behind the person, and you just love people. And it's what motivates your work and your research. And you're one of again, we haven't known each other long, but in the last year, just watching your work, you are one of the most prolific, hardworking people. At the rate at which you produce your material and your content is just amazing to me. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there and kind of affirm the work you're doing. But to get our conversation going, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the current conversation happening at the moment in deconstruction and within deconstruction circles?
Sure. I mean, deconstruction just becomes more and more and more of a hot topic. The more people discover this language for what they're going through, like you're saying, this is not a new idea. Barry, you're from the UK. You'll know that the UK had a great falling away from Christianity a long time ago. They had their deconstruction a long time, but they didn't have globalism on the same scale that we do today. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have all those things. And so what happened was people started questioning, and their options were basically, well, you stay a Christian, or you kind of go out into kind of atheist agnosticism or something. Sure. Or maybe you stay some sort of Christian or spiritual, but you kind of don't have any way to express it or explore it. Maybe a few kind of fringe things like sea of faith or, different things. And so that happened all throughout Europe decades ago. And what we're seeing in America is really the same shift. It's a shift from kind of conventional thinking to kind of post-conventional, modern, even postmodern thought. That's causing people to start asking these questions. But what they can do is they can start typing into Google, and they find people called deconstruction and ex-evangelical and whatever. And so suddenly there's communities that people can latch onto and give language. And what it means is that transition is looking so much more interesting, so much more nuanced, so much more complex, so much more diverse, because there's all these pockets of communities. And you can narrow that right down. You can go, oh, I'm a black person deconstructing. You'll find some Facebook groups for black people that are deconstructing, right? It's like, or you can go, oh, I'm a deconstructing, but I came from Southern Baptist. You'll find some groups for just those people. And that's an incredible thing when you think back to how hard this process can be for some people.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, keep going, Brian.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
What I was going to say, what we're seeing right now, though, and this is the big shift, is in the last few weeks, this is like a really hot topic because the Gospel Coalition, wonderful, conventional people, they have started to freak out about it. So they wrote a book. Some other big name pastors, most of whom I have no idea who they are. People send me these links and go, what do you think about this person? I'm like, I don't know who this is. Can you? I don't know. Oh, it's conventional pastor saying he doesn't like deconstruction. I'm shocked. It's not too surprising. But most of these people are starting to really get wind of the language of the shift. So when I used to travel and speak around the world in churches and conferences, pastors would always come up to me and go, what do I do about people leaving the church? Why are people leaving my church? And we'd have these kind of conversations. Now they're not just asking those questions. They know what to call those people and what that movement is. And so now they're trying to change the narrative about that. Now they're saying, oh, well, deconstruction, we can try and kind of redefine that. We can try and kind of box in what that is, which, I think this group of deconstructionists, this modern movement of deconstruction has in some way done that already, has some way already redefined what deconstruction can look like based on how it's been used historically as well. But yeah, it's becoming a very hot topic right now, especially in the evangelical worlds who are freaking out, as you would, right? This is people choosing to leave their faith, go to hell, reject God. These are terrifying concepts for a conventional Christian. So of course,
their churches as well. So.
Well, and not to mention that bills are getting harder to pay. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, I think you had something you wanted to say.
Sorry, I was talking over you then.
Oh no, I was giving you space to comment.
No, I was just saying I very much agree with you that this conversation, I mean, to some degree, this conversation wouldn't be happening the way it's happening without digitality and without the access of the internet, which kind of fosters, as you said, a kind of more globalized look at all of this stuff. And it's not surprising to me that there is a reaction from the traditionalists. To some degree, it's actually no different than the thing that happened with the emerging church in the late 90s. It was the same dynamic, you know. Once people caught wind of the potential threat of the ideas that are percolating within a particular group, there's always an attempt to co-opt the narrative. Yeah. And I think it gets co-opted two ways, actually. I think firstly, and the more dangerous co-opting for me than even the reaction against it is the commodification of deconstruction by deconstructionists, in that because it's hip, it has economic value. And economic value means opportunity. And opportunity means, in some ways, as much danger as it does possibility. Because this is how I think the various moves within, particularly for people who stay within the horizon of a Christian conversation, that it becomes quite a complex dance between commerce and I won't say integrity, because I don't doubt anybody's integrity ever, but the commodification of a particular shift or move, a philosophical, ideological, theological one, is a big challenge as well, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. People constantly, it feels like in this move that there's a very I think generally speaking, this is much more an early stage of deconstruction, that you rail against where you came from. And I think there's lots of shadow work and shame and guilt and all sorts of regret. And really, it's a lot of projection and whatever, and trying to deal with the fact that you were part of something you don't like anymore. So there's a lot of attacking where you were. And can you believe this pastor says deconstruction's wrong? And it's like, yeah, like, what were you expecting? That's like saying, can you believe this Trump supporter doesn't believe in climate change? It's like, yeah, I can actually. That's not too much of a jump for me. And so I think, like you're saying, like that's one thing, and that can be harmful for sure. But I think the much more subtle, dangerous component is those that find themselves within this community, and with the best of intention, the most like kind heart and empathetic, compassionate desire to help people going through this. Maybe through some commoditization, wanting to make money and support themselves. Maybe they come out of a pastoring job and they're rebranding, right? They're like, how do I pay my bills with this model? But I think that in itself, whilst dangerous, I think it's fairly easy to spot and go, I've been burned for 20 years by people trying to make a buck off me. The thing I see dangerous in that group is that people that are deconstructing, that on the whole haven't really particularly deconstructed, they've rebranded. And what they desire is reframing the conversation as, you should rebrand like me. And so when you deconstruct, you're coming out of this like position where in conventional mindsets, you want this authority figure to kind of help you, to guide you, to give you safety, certainty, tell you what to believe, tell you what the Bible means, tell you what God said, whatever it is. When you come out of that and you start finding your own autonomy and individualism, which is a lot of what's going on as you deconstruct, you still have, no one goes to these flip-flop from 100% one to 100% the other. So a lot of people as they come out are still looking for some safety. They're looking for some certainty. They're freaking out a bit. They're scared. And what happens is they go to someone that's vocal in this space, and they go, what should I believe about this? Or what where does this end? Or what does this, whatever. And you might find a certain progressive Christian. It could be anything. It could be atheist, could be progressive Christian, whatever. But maybe we'll pick progressive Christian, goes, don't worry. What's going to happen is you need to question these 5 beliefs. And then if you believe these, then you'll rebuild and you'll be fine and you'll reconstruct. A lot of people talk about reconstruction a lot. But in my experience, most of the people talking about reconstruction have a very questionable ethic, in my opinion, because, and it's again not intentional, I don't think people are intentionally aware that other people are looking for this certainty and safety, and that they're potentially holding them back from growing further by giving them early on in their deconstruction, here's some solid answers, just do this and you'll be fine. I think it stops people questioning and growing. So I think that's one of the biggest concerns I have, which doesn't make me a lot of friends in this community actually, because a lot of people do that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And as you say, I don't think it's ill-intentioned. It's just it's the tendency is to tweak to tweak
Yeah.
things, you know, to kind of make a little bit more room for yourself. You know what I mean? To feel a little more at ease. You still have certainty, but the belt's a little looser. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's a little fuzzy around the edges, but it's still a belt. You know, you haven't
Yeah.
actually taken the belt off and let it all hang out, which I think is probably, you know, I think it takes a while to get there. And not and you know, as you've said in your work, everybody is working through different stuff, and people are looking for different things, and people stop at different points along the way. They find a level of comfort or kind of self-satisfaction or ease. You know, they answer an important question, and once they've answered that one question, that's enough for them. You know what I mean? I mean, I think,
and that's a beautiful thing. It's not even a negative thing.
No.
It could be great if that's what they need right now, and that's what gives them the platform to continue to grow and be healthy in this world.
Exactly.
It's not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah.
No, not at all.
I think a lot of this is centered in that, you know, when people are questioning in response to their own intuition and kind of listening to the whispers that they're hearing, you know, intellectually, philosophically, theologically, those sorts of things, they never imagine, like the imagination isn't quite big enough, and it's not their fault. It's not anyone's fault. It's just kind of how we've been conditioned as humans in, you know, religious settings and contexts. We have just very little imagination for total loss of certainty. And so when we start questioning certainty, it's unimaginable that we wouldn't have some category of certainty. So we kind of move from one form of it to another, even though it looks very different and oftentimes doesn't look like certainty, because we were certain about this reality and now we're not. But that still means if we follow that train of thought, it still means that we're certain about something else. And, you know, I know that you've talked about this on your videos of deconstruction, Barry, and I have certainly talked about it, you know, and we often say people don't realize that they're buying and trading in the same currencies. It's just a little bit of a different, you know, what's for sale. And so, you know, I'm really interested in kind of getting the conversation, you know, a little bit deeper in terms of like what ground zero is. You know, Peter Rollins talks about the idea of like living in the lack all the time. And living in the lack, you know, deconstructing to get to that lack, to get to that emptiness, to get to, you know, pushing the wish fulfillment and kind of being whole and aside, and that whole, you know, object of desire piece, just living in that lack without any hope of ever getting outside of that lack. So biblically speaking, how do we learn to live in the sackcloth and ashes without any promise of not being there? And I think that life will always take us away from the lack, and we'll kind of have this like, you know, up and down cyclical relationship with the lack. And I think life will always take us out of the sackcloth and ashes phase. But what would it look like to accept that this might be all life is and all life has for us? And then what would that be? And I don't know what the balance is there, because, you know, I want to have hope. I want people to have hope, but at the same time, you know, I want the entire veil to be lifted. I want us to see the whole man behind the curtain. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think this is fascinating, right? What we're talking about here is such an existential process. It's like this is my entire being, this is my existence that we're unraveling here. As you know, like, of course it's going to be terrifying. Of course, uncertainty. I mean, just to frame ourselves, we need to tell ourselves some stories. You know, there's a part of our brain that's it basically what it does is it syncs up all the different senses so they happen at the same time, because they don't happen at the same time. If you play a piano, you press the key, you hear that. At a different time, you see your finger. At a different time, you feel the key being touched. Those three things are actually out of sync, but your brain goes, well, that's terrifying. What the heck is me if all those things are happening? You know, so it just goes, let's just sync that up and we'll be a bit safer. And so from the ground up, we have evolved to build stories and create meaning that helps us have a sense of self. And I think what's happening in deconstruction is we're starting to question these stories, starting to take these stories apart. And it's terrifying. And I think this is why, you know, I was saying when Barry's describing this thing of like certain people along the way go, oh, I feel good, quite good. I've answered a few questions. It's like, that's great. That's really good. Be in your body. Experience what it's like to be okay. Take a big breath. That was a tough like month, year, decade. Take a breath. It's okay. Go get like a Big Mac or whatever you need to do to like refuel, relax, take some breaths, play with your kids. And when that itch comes again. And when you start looking at a new thing and going, yeah, but that doesn't make sense either, start pursuing it. And I think I think I have to, generally speaking, what I see with people is you have to give them space to do this in their own time. We all need to do this as we're comfortable to push. I think there's a theory of like ego backlash, which I don't know. I'm not an expert in psychology or any of these different fields, but from my understanding of it, what happens with ego backlash is when you start pushing the ego a little too much, it backlashes, right? It kind of pushes back on that and goes, no, 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 we're not having this. And so one of the ways I see this play out, right, is if I change my diet, right? A really simple way to question the ego, to question who I am, is to go, oh, I don't like what I'm eating. I think I'm going to change it. I'm going to try and be a better person, a healthier person, whatever. If I push my ego too much and go, no, Phil, you're now a person that only eats kale, raw. Just that's it. That's all you're eating for a month. I guarantee within about 10 minutes, my ego is going to backlash and I'll have finished off like 8 steaks and, you know, everything that you could imagine to fry. Or meditation, you know, with meditation, if we start to meditate and we start to explore, and meditation can be a very scary ego work, because you really start to question, who am I, when you kind of take a step back and go, oh, there's something watching me. What's that? What am I? What's going on? If you start your meditation practice with a 1.5 hour meditation, I guarantee you're going to get some ego backlash. I guarantee if you push your meditation too much, if you start pulling away at yourself and questioning yourself too much, you're going to just you're just going to bail on meditation for a month. And so I think, generally speaking, when you're looking at something like deconstruction, what a lot of people end up doing is they push themselves way too hard, way too fast. They're looking for, I need to get the right answer. I need to push myself. I need to tear apart. But you're talking about, you know, just even, is there a God? Well, my entire existence is wrapped up in that answer.
Yeah.
Is, you know, where do I go when I die? Again, I've lived the last 2 decades building everything I believe about myself around the point of me going to heaven and not going to hell. So just questioning one thing can unravel who I am. And that's really hard work. And so I think we've got to find balances in our life of, as we approach these things, as we start pulling in more uncertainty and letting go of more certainty, we have to have a bit of grace for ourselves. That's traumatic work for a lot of people in a lot of ways. And we have to do that in as a healthier way as we can. And that's going to look very different for different people, of course. Different people are wired differently. Yeah. But yeah, I think we need to find grace for ourselves in that process for sure.
Yeah. I think that is probably why there is such resistance to deconstruction or any kind of unraveling or distant, you know, whatever words you want to use there, because it is a matter of like, my identity is at stake. And for most people, like you said, they've spent decades forming their identity around a particular narrative of Christianity. And they've lived their life a lot of times reluctantly in a certain way, you know, full of sacrifice, full of abstaining from certain things, certain behaviors in life, because of a specific interpretation of the Bible, Christianity, and as motivation for the proper geographical location of afterlife. And if these things turn out to be not true, or you know, that there are different interpretations of these things, that is absolutely devastating, I think. And I have a lot of compassion, especially, you know, think about it, if like you're in you're later in life and you have spent your in, you know, I'm in my late 30s, and I talk with people who are my age all the time, who, even though we're still relatively young, feel like that they had a lot of times either stolen from them or wasted, you know. You know, because some people choose Christianity as adults, and you know, you're in your right mind, you're fully formed, you're making a conscious, but you know, a lot of people grow up in the church as children, and it's abusive. And it's a real shame. You know, your mind is formed around these things, and you don't, you know, Barry and I have very different stories. I was a child in church and he was an adult in church, and so we kind of come at it from different ways, you know. But I'm always saying, I never thought there was anything outside of this. I never thought, I mean, I knew that there was, but to me it was like unthinkable and evil. And
Right,
you know,
the path to hell.
yeah. Like you're kind of forced into these situations as a child, and then you move into adulthood, and then maybe by some stroke of chance you start poking at something and start questioning something. But then once you get to that space of like, okay, it's all kind of come down for me now, then it's like, wow, I just lost, a lot of my life. And while in reality you still have so much more life left to live, and it's good you've kind of figured these things out now, there is still so much grief
Yeah.
over that loss. So you have the loss of identity, you have the loss of time, you have the loss of, a lot of people ditched and bailed on friendships and relationships. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people chose to go to Bible colleges and go into ministry, and as opposed to pursue a different interest at university, or just so many things that have been lost. And I think that's
Yeah.
why the deconstruction community, even though it's kind of at its beginning and probably has such a long way to go, and so many developments it will take on, is helpful, because it's giving people that space to grieve collectively together.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we've really had that.
No, I don't. I think there's a lot more space for a lot of people. I think some people go through that process quicker than others. I think generally speaking, one of the things that I think is so complex with working with the deconstruction community is because the deconstruction community is the very nature of deconstruction as it's used in this context. Of course, we're not talking about Jacques Derrida or anything like this, but
Yeah.
its commonality is not what it believes. So if you have an atheist believes, I don't believe in a theistic model of God, or that it's likely that there's a God or anything. A Christian believes, I believe in the Son of God, Jesus, and he died and rose again, and if I believe it, I'll go to heaven. Whatever. A Muslim might go, I believe in, the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, and, blessed be his name, and I follow the Quran. A deconstructionist believes, fill in the gap, right? Could actually be any of those people before. It's not that you can easily point to, this is who it is and this is what it believes and blah, blah, blah. What the commonality is that they're coming away from a similar experience. They're coming away from their faith tradition. Not even the same faith tradition, maybe. So even two people deconstructing might be moving away from two very different religions even, or certainly different segments within a religion. And so I think it's just really complex to deal with any one person as you dealt with the last person. Everyone's going to have these unique questions and unique experiences, and unique processes to grieve, to think different things, to regret. There's broad strokes of maybe in most of Christianity, people didn't, they waited to marry before they had sex, and therefore they never really dated lots of people. They never really got to know lots of people, got to know themselves and how they operate relationally. And so maybe a common theme for a lot of them might be, I regret that I never really got to know myself and what I wanted in a partner before I got married. Something like that. But that's still not going to be the case for a lot of people. A lot of people are delighted they did that still, and they love their partner still. And so there's these different components that you've got to kind of weigh up. But I do think that regret is going to be common across the board in different ways, for sure. And I think that's tough as well, right? I mean, gosh, I talked to one woman recently, and she was about 60 something. She was late 60s, I think. And she says, I've wasted my entire life praying to a God that doesn't exist, and worrying about a hell that doesn't exist, and hoping to go to a heaven that doesn't exist, and going to a church and forming relationships with people that totally have bailed on me overnight. And that, yeah, whether that's true or not, whether it actually was a waste or not,
Yeah.
you're going to have to grieve that. You're going to have to feel that and let it be, and process and work through that. What I have found is, generally speaking, most people get to a place where they can start to integrate that past. And I think this is a big part of deconstruction. If you're going to survive long term without just wallowing in pain and misery, which I think that's part of the process, but I don't think I like to do that for too long. At some point you have to go, yeah, but that made me who I am actually.
Yeah.
I spent years preaching in churches and all sorts of stuff, and spewing all kinds of things. I'm like, gosh, that was unhealthy. That was not good. That was not probably abusive. It was sexist or misogynistic or probably racist, and all sorts of things were probably part of my path. And I have beat myself up about that. I've done a good chunk of beating myself up, more than any very liberal, postmodern, progressive could ever do. I have done the work on beating myself up. But at a certain point I go, you know what? That's why I'm so passionate about speaking out against sexism in the church. And that's why I'm still doing this work, trying to help people that are navigating at church, or trying to reach people in church and help them explore broader perspectives, because I was so harmed by the church, because I taught unhealthy things in the church, because And so it's not to say it's all good, it's to say this shaped me into something that can be good. And then also you look at things and you go, do you know what? Did the church teach me anything that's good? It's kind of like the bad day idea, right? So how many times do you like something? Yesterday, me and my wife, we went for a walk. We did lots of really amazing things, but at some point in the afternoon where something was going wrong when I was trying to cook or something, and I was like, oh, I'm just having such a bad day. And I was like, hold on. Remember, bring yourself into this moment. You're having a bad moment. But actually, of the 24 hours, maybe you've done like 14 hours so far, you've probably had about 18 bad minutes. The rest has been actually pretty good, right? And so it's this thing of like, yes, there's so much harm in the church. Yes, there's so much negative stuff. Yes, like that can be really unhealthy. Yes, it might have been a waste of time that you could have put to use better in other ways. But did you learn what it's like to be loyal to a group? Did you learn what it's like to be disciplined and to go after something because you believe in something bigger than yourself? Did you learn to be a committed friend? Did you learn compassion and start to see compassion? Your compassion might have been very insular, quite small. Some of these concepts are quite small and just limited to your church, your group, just the Southern Baptists, just the Americans, just the people from Manchester, whatever it is. But you learned that. Before that, you didn't have a lot of those skills and gifts. And so I think it's starting to integrate, gosh, there's a lot in this path that was actually really helpful for me. And yeah, we need to speak out against what's wrong. Yeah, we need to change that. Yeah, we need to kind of do what we can to heal from that and move forward and not bring that unhealthy stuff with us. But let's not sweep it all away and fight it for the rest of our life, because the truth is, if you're 68 and you just got deconstructed from Christianity and deconverted, and you're going to fight 68 years as the worst thing ever, you're rejecting yourself and your identity and who you are and what you've become. And I think that is where the regret kicks in so hard, when we can't really start to look at it a bit more hopefully. One of the things I do with people when they come to me with this is I just say, can you get me an A4 sheet of paper? It's letter paper for Americans. And can you just fill it, just write down things that you learned in the church that you use today that you're thankful for. Just write a few things down and see if you can fill the page. And people come back to me and they've got like 5 or 6 pages at times. They just like, they've filled it and they're going, this is a really helpful exercise. I just saw that it's not all bad and negative, and I can be thankful for some of it. And if that's all it is, I'm not saying you need to go, yay, praise the white saviorism in church. Yay, church is like purity culturing and shaming women and whatever. No, not at all, right? That stuff is reprehensible and harmful. But can we integrate some of our past as going, no, that wasn't all negative and all bad. There's some stuff in here that's in me that's really great, and I don't need to fight all of my past.
I love that. I love what you said. I actually wrote it down, and you might find it on a quote post, of course, with your name attributed. But you said, this shaped me into something that can be good. And I love that, because not all of life is bad. Life can be bad, but not all of life is. And
absolutely.
For me, people ask me all the time why I'm still within the bounds of Christianity, and why I still I mean, if you really press me, I would say post-Christian, post-theist, but I still consider myself a Christian, very much so, and nobody gets to take that from me. Like I decide my story and my narrative and what I'm going to be a part of, what I'm going to be called, right? But people ask me all the time why I'm still there, and it's because this has been my story. This has been my identity. This is what I've spent my whole life in and studying. And just because I don't engage with God or with Jesus or with the Bible or whatever, the way someone else might, who's in a more traditional form of Christianity, doesn't mean that I am not, a Christian and committed to the imperatives that we find in the New Testament of redemption and restoration and hospitality and, all of these things. So, I mean, I totally get that. That resonates with me. That is definitely, a big reason on why I'm still doing the work that I'm doing. Like you said, it's the reason why you're doing the work you're doing. Barry, I can see kind of your eyes and your brain's moving. And
oh no. There's too many things to discuss.
But we've got another longer podcast after this. We can
we can go down as many rabbit trails as we can.
We're going to end soon, and I want to give Phil the last thought. But Barry, why don't you give us the second last thought?
Try to be profound, but don't crack open any can of worms, Barry. Come on.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to
We'll leave a cliffhanger,
Well,
and we'll send people to Phil's
I think,
podcast.
I guess this, to me, a lot of this conversation seems to me to simply be a question of understanding a different dynamic about the nature of faith. I struggle with the use of the word deconstruction with this conversation. I have to be honest, I really do. And that's because I practice philosophical deconstruction, which is an entirely different thing. And to me, this seems not to be deconstruction. It to me, this sounds like development, actually. Growth. It's about I see quite clearly the markers of things like James Fowler's stages of faith. I've spent a lot of time recently looking at the sort of deconstruction conversations, and they bear the hallmarks of what Fowler sort of called his stages 4 and 5. I mean, there are some very clear dynamics. The interesting question, the interesting issue for me is how it is that, if you like, Christianity and Christian practitioners got stuck in a particular mode of reality and closed the doors so tightly that we have to call a natural cycle of the human condition of questioning the nature of reality a deconstruction. To me, this is like to me, that's the question within the whole conversation of deconstruction that I think is and it's a conversation for another time conversation, you know what I mean, or an issue. It's not a pressing one because it's not so personal. It's more of an overall objective thing. But I was just thinking about all of that while you were talking, and you were just making all of my synapses fire, so I'm grateful for that.
I love it. Well, we'll engage your synapses on my podcast for sure, because I really want to talk about the philosophy of deconstruction as well, and just I think a lot of people, they just don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, gosh, a lot of philosophers have struggled to go into deconstruction. I mean, like it's like hallmark of like one of the most complex and hard people to engage with is Derrida, and so maybe we can open that up anyway. But I do agree. I think that certain people, as they progress and as you say, develop, as they grow, as they move through these stages of faith, I think it's quite common that people might arrive towards tiptoeing into Derrida's philosophy of deconstruction, potentially. But I do think the vast majority of people are nowhere near that at all. And what you're looking at is a much earlier conversation within philosophical literature. You're looking at modern philosophy, not postmodern philosophy by any means, as what's going on with this transition. You know, this is in some ways it's quite funny, but this is the Enlightenment. This is what we're basically going back to here. We're going back to very, very simple questions like, wait, who said you're in charge, and why do you have all the answers? And what about this person? Or what about me? Can I think for myself? Can I arrive at these conclusions? Can I study this? Can I look at rational? This is what deconstruction is really. It's not this profound, post-structuralist kind of like tearing everything apart and questioning everything. You know, I think, and I think that's something that the vast majority of people don't need to know or care about too much, probably.
Only if you're interested.
But if you're interested, I think you can get real tripped up if you know about the philosophy of deconstruction. You can go, what the heck is going on here? This isn't deconstruction at all. And I do think it's really interesting. Where did this come from? Probably came from someone that just was like, gosh, this is like knocking down a house. And they were like, it's like deconstruction. And that's like, it took off. Or something, I don't know, you know?
That's really how it goes.
So yeah, exactly. I mean, very rarely is it someone that's some highfalutin philosopher that's very wise, because they're usually hidden in a room with a book. It's usually some random guy that works on a construction site going, "Gosh, this is like my work," or who knows, you know, someone much more grounded in day to day. Sorry, Barry, I'm not saying you're not grounded in day to day, but I know you probably enjoy a good book. I'm nowhere near day to day. Yeah, I guess what I would say is, you know, this is whatever we call it, however we engage with it, however we go through it. I agree. I think this is a beautiful evolution. It's a growth. It's a development. And I think in some ways this is what the church has been praying for hundreds of years. They've been praying for a new revival. They've been praying for, you know, the Spirit to move us on and to bring breakthrough and to call us closer to what might be called divine. However you engage with those concepts, Spirit, God, divine, I think we are as a species evolving in our consciousness, evolving in how we engage with these topics, and deconstruction is a part of that answer to prayer. If there was anyone that answered it, you know, it's us manifesting what the church has been crying out for so long: a growth, a development, an awakening. You know. The world entering into the kingdom of God. What's funny is, of course, one of the main mechanisms that's working right now is by people leaving church and going out into the world. But yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing, and I'm excited. But I don't say that in the sense that it's not hard. It is really hard. It's really lonely. It's very scary. It's very existential work. It's tiring. It's exhausting. If you're doing this with like 3 kids and stuff, God help you. Honestly, you know, there's so much work in this in and of itself. And so, if people are going through that, take your time. This isn't a race, you know, just like any kind of development or growth. You grow at your own pace. You grow at what's healthy for you. Take your time. Make sure you're nourishing yourself. You're caring for yourself. You'll get there, you know. What is there, right? Here is now, and enjoy that.
So the moral of that story is be careful what you pray for then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially if you're very rigid about it.
The appropriate, you know, person or persons to answer prayer has in fact answered, which is humanity.
Yeah,
we're the answers to our own prayers, and we're the ones who can change and transform lives and reality. So Phil, thank you so much. This has been such a fabulous conversation. Where can people find you and your work? Because you're
sure
fabulous.
My main bulk of stuff is on Instagram, so come and find me on Instagram. I'm just Phil Drysdale. I do have a website, phildrysdale.com. I also have a podcast, Phil Drysdale Show. Check that out, because we're about to go and have like a hour-and-a-half conversation about this stuff and really dive in more. I'm gonna crack Barry's skull open and look at philosophy. And I guess the number one thing for people listening, probably the most helpful thing for people listening, is the deconstructionnetwork.com. Completely free resource. Everything I put out is free, so don't never worry about me charging you or anything like that. The deconstructionnetwork.com is a resource that you can put in your name and your city, your state or whatever, and it will basically show you everyone near you that is also on that network, and you can message them. And so it's just a way that people can connect with other people that are going through a similar experience, which is so huge, because so many people lose friends, family, church, communities as they go through this process. But you don't necessarily have to do this alone. At least check out the Deconstruction Network. And we do a lot of research on this community as well, and you know, what is this? How does it look? You know, we're doing research on that website, so you can find some different research articles and stuff like that on there as well. If that's more of your itch. I know I'm a big information person.
Wow, Phil, so, that is, you told me about the Deconstruction Network, but I had forgotten about it. And it's, oh my gosh, it's just incredible that you've done that and provided that amazing resource to people. So we'll put all of that in the show notes, as long as it all fits. 500 characters. Thanks, Phil. This has been absolutely amazing. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'll do it again. We'll see everyone next week. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.